All right, everybody, we're going to be doing our Torah reading for this coming week. So if you want to open up your scriptures and you can read along with us, the Torah reading for this week, we're starting off and here we go. Well, thank you, Liga St. Ledger. Thank you so much, sister. We're starting off the Torah reading for Leviticus 12 to Leviticus 15. Leviticus 12 to Leviticus 15. Praise Yah. So we're going to read Leviticus 12 today. And yes, thank you for any super chats or help you give with this ministry. Thank you so much, Linda St. Ledger, and for anyone else that wants to support this ministry. Leviticus 12. And Yah spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if a woman has conceived seed and has born a male, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As on the days of her menstrual impurity, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day of the flesh of the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. And she shall remain in the blood of her cleansing 33 days. She shall not touch any holy thing. She shall not go into the sanctuary until the days of her cleansing are fulfilled. And if she bears a female, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her menstruation, and she shall continue in the blood of her cleansing 66 days. And when the days of her cleansing are fulfilled, for son or for daughter, she shall bring in a lamb, a son of a year, for a burnt offering, and a young dove or a turtle dove for a sin offering, to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he shall bring it near before Yah, and shall atone for her, and she shall be cleansed from the fountain of her blood, and the law of her who bears whether a male or a female. And if her hand is not able to find a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves, or 2 young doves, 1 for a burnt offering, and 1 for a sin offering, and the priest shall atone for her, and she shall be cleansed. Hallelujah. That was chapter 12, and since it was such a short chapter, we're going to read chapter 13 right now of the Torah for this week, this coming Shabbat, next Sabbath. So we continue in Leviticus chapter 13. And Yah spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, when a man has a swelling in the skin of his flesh, or a scab or a bright spot, and it shall become in the skin of his flesh like a plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought into Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons, this priest. And the priest shall look upon the plague in the skin of the flesh, and if the hair in the plague has turned white, and the appearance of the plague is deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy, and that priest shall look upon him and shall pronounce him unclean. And if the bright spot is white in the skin of his flesh, and its appearance is not deeper than the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the priest shall shut up the plague 7 days. And the priest shall look upon him on the 7th day, and behold, if the plague stays in its appearance, and the plague is not spread in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up 7 more days. And the priest shall look upon him again the 7th day, and behold, if the plague has become dim, and the plague has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is a scab, and he shall wash his garments, and he shall be clean. But if the scab spreads greatly in the skin after he has been seen by the priest for his cleansing, then he shall be seen a 2nd time by the priest. And the priest shall look, and behold, if the scab has spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. And when the plague of leprosy is in a man, then he shall be brought into the priest. And the priest shall look, and behold, if a white rising is in the skin, and it is turning the hair white, and living flesh is in the swelling, it is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean, and he shall shut him up, for he is unclean. And if the leprosy breaks out greatly on the skin, and the leprosy covers the skin of the one who has the plague from his head even to his feet, to all that appears to the priest's eyes. Verse 13, we're up to, of Leviticus. Then the priest shall look, and behold, if the leprosy has covered all his flesh, he shall pronounce the plague spot clean, and has all turned white, he is clean. And in the day of the living flesh is seen in him, he is unclean. And the priest shall look on the living flesh and shall pronounce him unclean. The living flesh is unclean, it is leprosy. Or when the living flesh turns back and shall be turned to white, then he shall come into the priest. And the priest shall look on him, and behold, the plague has turned white. The priest shall pronounce the plague spot clean, he is clean. And when the flesh has a boil in the skin, it has been healed, and a white swelling has replaced the boil, or a bright white spot, weary red or reddish white, then it shall be seen by the priest. And the priest shall look, and behold, if it appears is lower than the skin, and his hair is turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. If the plague of leprosy, it is the plague of leprosy, it is broken out in a boil. But if the priest looks at it, and behold, there is no white hair in it, and it is not lower than the skin, and has become dim, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And if it separates greatly in the skin, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean, it is a plague. And if in this plague the bright spot is stayed, it has not spread, it is an inflamed boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if there is flesh in which the skin has a hot burning, and the raw flesh of the burning becomes a bright white spot, being very red or white, and the priest shall look on it, and behold, the hair is turned white in the bright spot, and the appearance is deeper than the skin, it is leprosy. It has broken out in the burning, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy. Verse 26. But if the priest looks on it, and behold, there is no white hair on the bright spot, and it is no longer than the other skin, but is somewhat faded, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And the priest shall look on him at the 7th day, and if it is spread abroad very much in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. And if the bright spot stays in its place and does not spread in the skin, but is somewhat faded, it is swollen of the burning, the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is a scar of the burning. And if a man or woman has them a plague in the head or in the beard, then the priest shall look at the plague, and behold, if it appears it's deeper than the skin, a thin shining hair in it, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a scab, a leprosy on the head or beard. And when the priest looks on the plague of the scab, and behold, it is not in sight deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut up the plagued one with a scab 7 days. And on the 7th day, the priest shall look on the plague, and behold, if the scab is not spread, and there is no shining in the hair, and the appearance of the scab is not deeper than the skin, then he shall shave himself, and he shall not shave the scab. And the priest shall shut up the one who has the scab a second 7 days. And the priest shall look on the scab, and on the 7th day, and behold, if the scab has not spread in the skin, and appearance is not deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. And he shall wash his garments and shall be clean. And if the scab has spread further in the skin after his cleansing, and the priest has looked on him, and behold, the scab has spread in the skin, the priest shall not seek for the shining yellow hair; he is unclean. But if in his eyes the scab has stabilized, and black hair has sprung up in it, the scab has been healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. We're up to verse 38. And when a man or a woman has bright spots, white bright spots in the skin or other flesh of their flesh, and the priest has seen it, and behold, there are pale white spots in the skin of their flesh, it is a pale spot springing up in the skin, he is clean. And when a man's head grows bald, he is clean. And if his head grows bald from the center of his head towards his face, his forehead, forehead bald, he is clean. And if there is in the bald head or the bald forehead a reddish white plague, it is leprosy breaking out in the bald head or in the bald forehead, and the priest shall look upon him, and behold, if the rising of the plague is reddish white in his bald head or in his bald forehead, and the appearance of leprosy in the skin of the flesh, he is a leprous man, he is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head. And the leper who has the plague in him, his garments shall be torn, and his head shall be uncovered, and he shall cover the upper lip, and shall call out, unclean, unclean. And the days that the plague shall be in him, he is unclean, he shall live alone, he is unclean. His dwelling shall be at the outside of the camp. And if there is any garment, a plague of leprosy, in a garment of wool, or in a garment of linen, or in the wrap, or in the woof, or in the linen of the wool, or in the latter, or in any work of leather, and if the plague is greenish or reddish in the garment, or in the leather, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in anything of leather, it is a plague of leprosy, and it shall be seen by the priest. We're up to verse 50. And the priest shall look on the plague, and shall shut up the plague thing 7 days. And if he shall look on the plague on the 7th day, and if the plague has spread in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in the leather, of all that is made of the skin for use, the plague is corroding leprosy, it is unclean. And he shall burn the garment or the rope, or the woof, or the wool in the linen, anything of leather in which the plague is, for it is corroding leprosy, and shall be burned with fire. And if the priest shall look, and behold, the plague has not spread in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in anything of leather, then the priest shall command, and they shall wash that in which the plague is, and shall shut it up a second 7 days. And the priest shall look on that in which the plague is after it has been washed. And behold, if the plague has not changed its appearance, and if the plague has not spread, it is unclean. You shall burn it with fire. It is eaten away, it is inside or outside. And the priest shall look, and behold, the plague has become pale after it has been washed. Then he shall tear it out of the garment, out of the leather, and out of the warp, out of the woof. And it is still seen in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof. or in anything of leather, it is spreading a spreading plague. You shall burn it with fire. That is in which the plague is. And the garment or the warp or the woof or anything of leather, which you shall wash, when the plague has been taken off, then it shall be washed a second time, and it shall be clean. This is the law of the plague or leprosy in the garment of the wool or in the linen of the warped or in the woofed or in anything of leather, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean. That was chapter 13. So we read 12 and 13 of the Torah this week, and we'll continue tomorrow as we do that. All right, everybody, have a blessed day. Yah be with you. And thank you for watching, and shalom, shalom.